bringing the people behind our food to life.
Voting with your fork is a very politically powerful thing to do.
So let's talk about those scientists. There was a phrase in your book that I loved. I think you were telling us that your book was not a manifesto of a crackpot, though.
He protests too much.
He protested too much, exactly. So I watched with curiosity the degree to which the fast food industry, for example, really took issue with Eric Schlosser's work. And I have not noticed the same kind of industry backlash, or backlash may not be the right word, but I have not noticed
The pushback.
the same level of criticism related to your work, and I'm curious about that.
Yeah, well, it's a little early in the life of this book to get it. I do get pushback from people like the Corn Refiners Association. Every time I take the name of high fructose corn syrup in vain, they're always in touch, and they're very upset. I think it may be because I'm not mentioning food companies by name quite so much. You know, Eric really focused on McDonald's, and McDonald's took it very personally.
Yes.
When I did focus on a corporation by name, Whole Foods, I heard from them, and they pushed back pretty hard. I think that may be it. I have a very different rhetorical strategy than Eric. You know, this isn't an angry book, and that may be part of it, that the critique is a little more systemic and not about, you know, particular corporations.
It's about a conversation with nutritionists in general, not any one nutritionist in particular.
That's right. Yeah. And, you know, I haven't heard, actually, I thought I'd get more pushback from the nutrition community, but as it turns out, there's a very interesting conversation going on in the nutrition community now. And there is a recognition that the kind of reductive science they've been doing is perhaps not a fruitful avenue, and that there is work being done now to develop a kind of whole foods nutrition science, where you would look at dietary patterns. And in fact, now the National Science Foundation will actually give nutritionists money to study dietary patterns and not single nutrients. Very healthy development. So I think that there is some movement going on in that world, and a recognition that the way they've been going about it might not be the best way.
So perfect, they may be allies moving forward.
I think they may be, and what I hope to do with this book, one of the things I hope to do is start a conversation in that world, or advance a conversation that may be happening in that world. I've found more support from nutritionists than I expected.
Okay, perfect. Well, that segues right into the next question, which relates to your main thoughts on how we do go about rebuilding a healthy food system.
Well, we have to work from two different angles. We have to work from the consumer, who has a great deal of power in these relationships with food companies, with food producers. And that voting with your fork is a very politically powerful thing to do. When the consumer recognizes that he or she is also a citizen, and is voting with their food dollars for a different kind of food system, we have seen that works. We have seen new food systems built by consumers hooking up directly with producers, with very little help from the government. Organic was built that way. The grass-finished beef industry is being built that way. So I think that's plan A, and that involves all of us spending more money to the extent we can on food, and making better choices, and realizing that we can't decide these on the narrowest grounds of self-interest, that we have to take a broader view of what our health is, and what our food dollars are really about. And the second is at the policy level. There are many people who can't afford to vote with their forks. And so we need to vote with our votes as well, and bring about change. Because right now we have a system where the cheapest calories in the supermarket are precisely the least healthy. Added fat, added sugar. And the reason for that is that that's what we subsidize.
Right.
And we do very little as a matter of foreign policy for the growers of actual food, which we ghettoize as specialty crops.
Right.
Specialty crops means food you can actually eat.
It's so special.
It's so special, but the money goes to the non-special crops.
Right.
So you know, there's a lot of work to be done at that level, and that speaks to school lunch as an issue. That speaks to getting supermarkets into the inner city, ending that grocery redlining that's essentially going on today.
What does that mean, grocery redlining?
Well, you know, in the same way we recognized in the 60s and 70s that one of the real problems in the inner city, called the ghetto then, was the fact that nobody could get credit. People didn't have access to money. Banks would look at zip codes and say, well, we don't lend there. And we banned that. There was a law passed in Congress that made it a very serious crime to redline. And this brought a lot of investment into the inner city. Well, we have the same problem with access to food in the inner city. There are not supermarkets there. They tend to stay away, yet the fast food outlets go in and do very well. Now, policy brought the fast food outlets in. People don't realize that's not strictly free market. The Small Business Administration was working very hard to create small businesses in the inner city, and they funded these franchises, which are often locally owned. We need to do the same thing to get supermarkets in there, because we know that access to fresh fruits and vegetables are a critical issue in health, and that is the limiting factor, that when people have access to it, they're much more likely to cook and eat, in a healthier way.
Right.
So we know that distance to a source of fresh fruits and vegetables is a very good predictor of health outcomes. So we have to shrink that distance. So there's a whole range of things you have to do at the policy level. It's not enough to vote with your fork, but it's not trivial at all. One in 3 children born in 2000, according to the government's own statistics, will have type 2 diabetes unless we change. We are at a fork in the road as a society. And I think that increasingly people are coming to recognize this. And we either become the Lipitor nation, the place where you have dialysis centers on every street corner in the inner city next to the check cashing shop, or we change. And we change and we start eating in a different way. We stop eating fast food. And so 2 things will drive that change. One is fear, a public health crisis that we can't afford. At some point, the government will get really serious, as they did about cigarette smoking, with a public health campaign that really worked and tax policies that really worked. And we changed. I mean, that is a very important model. If you want to see how a society can dramatically change something that everybody thought would never happen, look at cigarettes. There is a new taboo around smoking that didn't exist 20 years ago. That's a very powerful thing. Taboos are much more powerful than policies. I can imagine the same thing happening in food for similar reasons, public health crisis. It may await having national health care, because right now we don't connect the dots. We have the food issue here and we have the health care issue here. And the people responsible for the health care issue are not responsible for our food, and vice versa. If the government were paying for our health care, the government would have a very strong interest in changing the way people eat. So you see, it's all connected. It's all connected. But I do think we're moving in that direction, and I see many, many reasons for it. I mean, it is the best of times and the worst of times when it comes to food, but I focus on the best, and there are a lot of very positive things happening. So I'm going to leave you with that, and thank you for your excellent questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoy the book.